Campbell.
All right, now that we've suitably established how old most of us are, we'll jump into the new technology. I'm Emily Campbell. You might recognize me some such slides as the very cringy slide of me holding up the card in John's presentation, not realizing it was going to be in his presentation. So, OK, but actually, before we talk about AI, I'm just going to quickly share, this is not a talk about AI in the sense that it's not a hype talk. I don't know if it's good or bad. I'm not going to tell you that it's good or bad. But it is definitely something that's very ambient. And so before we get to that, though, let's talk about computers. Let's actually talk about way back, 80 years ago or so. When people thought about computers back in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, they thought about this, these big mainframe computers that would take up an entire room in your research facility. But there was actually a lot of stuff happening in addition to these gigantic IBM machines. Actually, in 1948, we have a book, Cybernetics, by, I always get his name wrong, Norbert Reiner. It's actually really interesting to read in between the math, where he introduces this new concept called cybernetics. Let's just kind of summarize it to the study of patterns. And also, around that same period of time, in the 1950s, you have the Dartmouth workshops. And this was a series of talks for about 4 to 6 weeks one summer, where they came up with this concept of AI. They just invented it. No, they didn't invent it. They gave it a name. They pulled from all of these different disciplines to say, what is this thing? What if there is some ability to take these patterns in human behavior and start to find the predictability amongst them, the feedback loops, the system effects? How could we understand this better? And they named it AI because they didn't want any single discipline to be overrepresented, so they came up with a term. So that'll come up again in a moment. And then you also, in MIT in the 1960s, you have the first natural language processing bot named Eliza that you could have chats with. So, OK, we've got AI, and yet the relationship that we had to our machines was pretty passive. I'd punch my card into the big, gigantic thing in the room, I'd get a response back. So, we didn't see the crumbling of Western civilization despite having AI in our lives. But something else happens. We start getting this. We start getting all of these computers show up, starting with Apple and this guy, which, by the way, if you go to Getty Images, there's an entire array of just like Bill Gates thirst traps. So did I spend 30 minutes doing that instead of making my slides? Yes. But suddenly we have computers in our home, not in these big research facilities. And then these guys show up and they start throwing CD-ROMs in our cars every time we're at a traffic light. Did anybody get that joke? Who's old? Yes. So suddenly, now we don't just have computers, but we have access to information. But it's still kind of this conglomerated thing, right? I go to these websites, they give me information back, they give me a lot of things I don't want back. But it's still kind of passive. It's like push, pull, and then also pop-ups. So still, not the crumbling of Western civilization, and then things start getting really weird. Because now we don't just go somewhere and get that information. Now we can follow people. We can follow companies. We can't just do that at home. We can do it in our pocket, right? And then they start following us around. And now we want to be on these devices and to get these updates all the time. And there's these feeds that show up with all this information, and we have to consume it because we have to know what the meme of the day is. Oh, one more fun fact. A friend of mine started calling it a meme, and it completely changes the game. So you're welcome. But it's not just for fun. It's not just families. It's not just people we're following. It's work. We're getting bombarded by work notifications. And then things start to really change. You start to see stuff like this. What happens is we're consuming all this information, and then it's giving us information back. And then, OK, we got to come back and do the next thing and get the next like and be the next person to go viral. Our stuff all starts to look the same. We start to become algorithms. Our behavior does anyway. Our behavior starts to show patterns. Well, hold on. Back in the 1940s, we were calling this thing cybernetics and then artificial intelligence because we were saying, hey, maybe this artificial intelligent thing can arise out of our patterns, but we are the artificial intelligence. In fact, it's not just like those people. There's an entire website that's just dedicated to sites that look like Linear's website. We all do it. We all do it. And we do it because we're incentivized to do it. So we might talk about this period of human and computer interaction as, oh, it's so personalized. I can get things that are so personal to me. It's such a catered experience. But the reality is it's performance-based. It's there to take our energy, send it out into the wild, click on ads, view ads, and make money for the folks who are driving the algorithms of our behavior. There's a boxer that was in the United States, you might have heard of him, named Muhammad Ali, and he has this saying that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. We just keep getting punched in the face, and we don't have a plan to get out of this. We're just spinning. And then, this happens. Well, we've been told in the last few years that this is the reason everything's getting bad, is this AI thing. Everything's the cheapening of content, the cheapening of our attention spans and our relationships and our work. But this was 2 years ago, and yet we've been living with all of these changes for a long time before then. So welcome to my talk. Whose fault is it? No, I'm kidding. But I do think it's important before we talk about this new technology and how we work with it and how it affects our products and our lives, that we start by recognizing we're here because of our own choices. We're here because technology we made, technology that has helped us do great things, and none of it had to do with ChatGPT. And again, this isn't a talk, ChatGPT, good, bad, but it does help us put the rest of this in context. So when I think about the shape of AI, and I'll go into this in just a moment, I see 3 things happening that I'm going to talk about. The first is we are noticing the way that we interact with technology starting to change. And some of that's changing intentionally, maybe some not so intentionally, but we have the ability to be intentional about it. So what patterns are we seeing? And how is that changing the patterns of behavior? Also recognizing that there's limits and opportunities to this. Like, this can be a really powerful thing in the right context. But we do have to be aware of the ways that maybe it isn't great all the time. And then finally, it starts with us. We created this thing. So that's an opportunity as well, but we also have to reckon with it. But let's go into this. And this is where I introduce myself again, but just in, like, why this? Why this topic? Why am I here today? So just a little bit about me. I am a design leader. I lead design for a startup working on developer skills. But I'm also really curious. And I find myself just like trying to tinker and pick at what's happening in the world and how can I better understand it. So after about 1.5 years of leading design for a company that was bringing AI into our products, I started to notice these patterns. And I created this website last March, like March 1st. I hit publish, called The Shape of AI. And I'd actually love if you wanted to visit it. It's all free. And I go through some of these patterns I'm going to talk about today and just say, like, what's happening here? How is this evolving? How can we understand this? What language might we adopt? So this is my shameless plug to go and visit my website. But before we talk about these patterns, let's go back to our interaction system. So we start with this. A human asks something from the computer, and the computer gives a response, right? That's our very passive give, get, binary. And then, it starts to get a little bit more complicated, but it's still give, get, and get, and get a bunch of stuff, but it's still pretty passive. And then it starts to get noisy. So now I'm following things, and now I'm, oh God, getting all of this. Have a sec. Oof, that one hurts. And so companies say, well, this isn't a great user experience. You know what we should do? We should build an algorithm, And now people will see what they want to see and nothing else. So it'll be such a better user experience. But of course, we actually don't see everything. We stop having the ability to be the agents of our own experience. Now, somebody else is doing things based off of something I might not even be aware that I'm doing, or maybe even someone I know is doing, feeds it into this black box, and then I get some of it back, but I don't really know why I'm getting all of it back. It's really confusing. It's really stressful. And I start seeing things that maybe I don't want to see. And then I start seeing things I don't know why I'm seeing it, and it's not demure, it's not mindful, and it's just not great. But what if it doesn't have to be this way? And that's one of the first opportunities that I would talk about with this whole AI technology as it relates to user experience design. So I show up as a human, I have some intent I want from the computer, and I give it some input, and I get some response. So that's familiar. But now is when things can get interesting, because maybe I didn't get the response I wanted. Maybe I wanted the response trained on something else or in a different format. I can start to tune how I interact with the computer. And actually, that's really great if I'm a power user and I know what I'm doing, but what do we do about people who don't even know this technology exists? You know, right now, you go to Facebook, you go to Google, you don't even know why you're getting these results. We might have an inkling because we do this professionally and we're paying attention, but there's so many people in this world who don't even know to ask or to look, and it creates not good situations. So what if we could make that easier? What if we can help people find their way to a better input into the computer, get some response, say, no, I don't want it that way. Actually, I wanted this. This is what I'm looking for. And over time, maybe even start to build trust with the machine and possibly even partnership with it. And that's like agentic UX. Now, this place still exists, the bad place. Contrast isn't great. I need better CSS variables. But, and the but is the important thing here, maybe we can return to a world where we, humans, are the agents of our experience with computers. And then maybe we'll have a better shot of harnessing this power to do the really big, important stuff that we want to do. So, new interaction patterns. This is what we're seeing with AI. Let me show you a few examples. Perplexity. Are we familiar with Perplexity in the room? Maybe most of us, some of us. Perplexity is a really interesting product. Perplexity.ai has some of the bad place stuff. But essentially, it's taking the ability to ask a question like you would Google, but making it more interactive. Let me show you. So the first thing that happens is I land on their webpage, where knowledge begins, okay, and I see some suggestions. We're going to come back to this in a moment, but it's not just a blank page. Right off the bat, there's some things I could do. I'm here to ask a question, to submit an input to the computer, but already, maybe it's not just binary. Maybe I can start to shape what it is that I'm asking right off the bat. Like I can ask in paragraph form some question that I'm interested in. Let's see, what example did I give here? Knowledge collapse. Ooh, this is a fun one. We'll talk about this one later. But so I have this question, and I go ahead and I hit go, and instead of just getting a list of results back, it starts to synthesize the information that it's pulling from the results. Now, maybe those results aren't great, but I can actually see them. I'm going to point at the screen now, so I'm going to do the thing you're not supposed to do. It tells me what it's doing. It tells me its logic. It says, this is how I'm coming up with your answer, and then this is where I got it from. Here's the sources. Are these the sources you wanted? What if there are other sources you wanted me to search? What if you only wanted me to search academic articles, or only search, mathematical equations or something to that end? I'm not just saying, here's what I want. Please, please, please give me responses that are decent despite being fed through your advertising algorithm. But it's giving me information, and then it's letting me say, do I trust this source? Do I want different sources? Do I want to learn more? I'm still in the driver's seat. So that's a really important change that we're starting to see. In fact, it isn't just about that initial call and response. I can go in and I can see, I've been calling these citations. You've been seeing them as well, I'm sure, where you don't just get the information, but it actually cites itself. It gives you a reference. And then you can ask follow-up questions, and it even makes it easy for you to ask follow-up questions. So if you're new into some area or topic, it gives you some hints of what you might want to learn. Now, they're going to have advertisements eventually. Are all of these resources credible? No. But that's not the solution. The solution is not make everything perfect. It's give me agency. It's don't hide from me that which I need to know in order to be the person in charge of my own experience. So I think Perplexity is a really interesting example. Let me go through a few more of these patterns. For those of us who are designers in the room, you'd be familiar with this concept, don't make me think. And essentially it's, let me do what I need to do without the interface getting in the way. Let me just focus on what I'm trying to achieve. Don't make me think about the product. So the fundamentals matter here. But what if we took that a step further and said, don't make me work? Like, it takes a lot of work to get around the algorithm. If you've ever gone into Twitter or one of these, X, and gone through the ad preferences and try to clear them out, they make it really hard. And if you've ever tried to cross-check where information is being synthesized from in these big blog machines, it's really hard. What if I didn't have to work so hard? So when we first started seeing this AI thing pop into our interfaces, we saw this, and this is not great. I still have to work. I still have to know what it is I'm looking for. I'm not going to get a great result out of 6 words describing a user experience. But we're starting to see things evolve. First, we saw these guys pop up. I've been starting to call these suggestions. Now, these aren't great, although I love the fact that the random example was about the Roman Empire. That killed me. But these are really great if you're just a new user and you're like, what is this A thing? Oh my gosh, I can pick out a good outfit to wear? The computer can help me do that? So it is a way to help people ease their way into this new technology. But we're already starting to see things shift. Maybe AI isn't just about going and chatting with a chatbot. Maybe AI can meet me where I am and do something that would take me a long time to do, or I might not be good at doing myself, but help me get to something valuable. Like Product Board, if anyone has worked with Product Board, it's product management software. One of the values of this product is it takes insights from the market. And it's a great concept that just fails on entry, because who's going to go and spend 5 hours a day reading through each one of these insights, really well-intentioned, hard to make time, hard to incentivize people to complete that task. Well, what AI does, what their tool does, is it aggregates it. And it says, hey, this could be interesting to you. You might want to go look at this. This seems similar. This seems related. I'm still the one doing the work. I'm not giving up the role of understanding my market to AI, but it's helping me. It's helping me do something that I don't have to work as hard for. Anyone who's had to build workflows or build forms, another way that it can help us is just kind of get us off to the right footing, get us started. Like if you're building Zaps in Zapier and you're like, I don't want to sit and just manually build this whole thing. Let me just describe what I want to do. It's not going to solve my problem for me. It can make it a little easier to get started. Who is completely overwhelmed by their Slack notifications? Thank you. Yes. Same. That arm flew right up. No, it is. It's like one of the most painful things about working these days is boom, 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 boom. We are drowning. Where's John? Drowning in information. There you are. We're literally drowning in the information as liquid. Slack this is actually a picture from their marketing site. They've been starting to introduce this into the wild. But their approach to AI is really interesting. It's saying, hey, since you've been gone, a lot of stuff has happened. Let me give you a summary, but I'll make it really easy for you to get to the place that you need to go to get more information. I'm not absolving myself of the responsibility of staying in communication with my team, but I can step away and maintain my sanity and not have to spend 2 hours going through 147 notifications. That's really helpful. I don't want to have to do that work. This one's a little tricky. It's a little controversial, I think, as we start to get into the generative writing tools. This is from Notion, let's see, Jasper. I've got so many of these examples I've just been collecting. But I've been using some of these words, like suggestions. Hey, you might want to check this out. Nudges. Hey, here's an action you can do. Parameters. Hey, do you want this shortened or longer? My brother-in-law is from Argentina, and he speaks English fairly well, but he is most recently promoted into leading a sales team. And he's always texting me, hey, I need to communicate something to my manager. She's based in the United States, and I want to sound professional. Is what I'm saying, is that how you say things? Well, maybe for those of us who are native speakers in our own language, having AI write something for us seems kind of contrived. But if you're trying to put something into another language, or if you're a manager who's focused on your tone, or maybe neurodiverse, this is an incredibly powerful tool to just check yourself, to check your language, right? And I don't have to go and expose myself to the vulnerability of asking someone. I can just get a hint. So that's really, really powerful. And what we're seeing is that the interface level of this is making it even easier to do this. So, little hints. And again, you're probably seeing all of this stuff start to pop up. Inline actions. Inline actions are really interesting. Because it's one thing to know, okay, go and talk to the big open input box, or, I have some specific tasks that I'm trying to do. But what if AI could just kind of meet you where you're at? Like, wow, I just ran a workshop in FigJam or in Miro, and I have a bunch of stickies, and I just need to quickly wrap my head around them. Well, hey, why don't you sort your stickies? I can help you do that. And then you can still take that information and move it around and play with it. But so you're starting to see how these patterns can actually make our lives a little bit easier if we are intentional about them. Context. Context is really interesting to me because everything so far has been, you want to do something, I can help you do that thing. But now we have this additional layer of the contextual information around you. So you remember our example of I start following people and then I'm just bombarded and bombarded and bombarded until there's an algorithm on the other side? Well, what if instead the context just kind of helped me get to something useful faster? Like I'm working on code, you know what repository I'm in, you know what language I'm writing in, you might even know how many bugs I've been dealing with and what I've been doing most recently. So just help me do that. Help me make it easier. Give me related searches. Help me dive deeper into a topic intelligently. If I don't know it well enough, I might not know what questions to ask. Now, this is opening up something even more interesting. What happens when the AI starts to do tasks for you? So you're not just interacting with it, but you're the one who's directing it to go and do something. Well, I'll tell you right now, one of the strongest metaphors for AI I've heard is that AI is an intern. Many of us have been interns. Interns are wonderful people. I do not let an intern go off and do something and write code and commit it or do a design and push it. If you do, come talk to me. I really want to know your methods. So we're seeing these patterns called share a plan, show me the plan, start to pop up. So now what happens is the AI comes in and says, hey, what's up? What do you need me to do? And you go, oh, well, I want to go and create a new color palette for these slides. Okay, cool. Here's how I think we do it. Is this right? Is this how we do it? And then I can tune it and say, no, that's not actually what I was hoping for you to do, but at least now I have a better understanding of what it is you interpreted my direction to be. Or I can say, that looks great, go do it, I'm going to lunch. So as we move into even deeper levels of interaction, we still come back to this layer of keeping the human in charge. I've got a few more of these examples, and then we'll start to move on into the okay, therefore what? It's really hard to prompt effectively. So breaking prompts down into smaller pieces can be helpful. And also just some people, if you had the mom test, if your mom wanted to complete a task like this first one, is she going to know to write this? No. But you can say, hey, here's a great way to get the outcome that you might be after, and all you need to do is provide a few basic links or a few bits of information. Now, I don't know if I agree with this use case, but now we can make it more usable. We can make it software. We can make prompting software. FigJam does this very interestingly. If you haven't walked through their onboarding, the way that they introduce the creation of something isn't just open-ended. It actually kind of gives you these little hints. It builds a template as you go. What if you're in tech support? Talk about a thankless job. Well, if you're lucky enough that you haven't been replaced by an AI agent, you're dealing with a lot of information all the time. How can we make that more easy? How can we aggregate, summarize, synthesize information that you would need, and then give you a link back to it? So here's a few more examples of those citations. If you've used Notion, you've seen these. All right, so one more layer. This is all really text-based. This is all really manual. One of the things we're seeing emerge with multimodality is taking this intention, applying it in the same way, but making it even easier. So here from Klarna, I have a receipt. And we can all think about examples, maybe in our work. Somebody might have a question about an invoice. That's a literal example here. Maybe I'm reading a summary of a PRD, and I'm like, where is this from? I just want to know. A picture of text, a picture of an interface, a picture of information can help you. There's an accessibility component here, because not everybody consumes information in the same way. So how can we make it easier to generate captions for images? What if I'm reading data, but it's just easier for me to view it in a different way? Or maybe I just know my boss likes line charts. Don't make me work. Just give me the solution. Two more on this. So as this is getting more advanced, we're actually seeing AIs go out and create full artifacts, full interfaces. If you haven't had a chance to play with Claude.ai artifacts, I highly recommend it. And of course, we're also still seeing this connecting with the chatbots, but with more intentional ways, like, hey, be an interviewer for me. Hey, be someone who can help me with my taxes. Just answer some basic questions for me so I can go into that conversation with the human more informed. This is a really interesting example of what GitHub is doing with their workspaces. So you can see that plan. I say, this is what I want you to do. It comes back and says, this is the spec. Did I understand it correctly? Yes, you did. Go write the code, and then it can release it. OK, cool, Emily. Yeah, we're seeing all this happen. This is interesting. It's helpful to see how these patterns are emerging. Maybe we're thinking about it in new ways. But is it good? How do I know I'm going to get a good result? If I build it into my product, is that ethical? Will my users know that they're interacting with AI? As we talk about the patterns of AI, it's not just about what I can do with it, but how I understand it and how much agency I have to know how I'm interacting with it. So there are really interesting identifiers. We're seeing AI start to evolve from just these of hey, I'm an AI bot, hey, created by AI. And instead, what's starting to happen is a couple different paths that, again, don't make me work, but still get to the outcome of knowing I'm interacting with AI intentionally. One of those is consent. This is the literal, I think it's called the literal, I'll remember what this is called. It's one of the pendants. And what they have done is they've actually programmed it in that it won't record the other person that you're speaking with until it actually can anticipate audible consent. That's a really big difference from, hey, such and such AI has just entered your Zoom with your boss. Do you want to drop the call? Of course you don't. You don't have agency in that situation. So how can we build in consent? How can we know what the AI is doing? I love messing around with Midjourney because it's the fastest way to understand how AI is interpreting our words. It'll actually show you, this is the prompt that I used to generate this, or here's some tokens at least that give you a general sense. If you prompt in Midjourney, show me a bear in a city, it'll show you a brown bear in a place like New York. If you say, show me a bear in China, it'll show you a panda bear, even though you didn't ask for it. That's bias, but you can see it. You can start to understand it. The better we can get at understanding what the AI is hearing and seeing and thinking and doing, the better we can be intentional about guiding our actions. You can actually ask ChatGPT and Claude for its tokens as well, so text has tokens. This is really interesting for me to learn. The AI is taking your prompt, and it's creating its own. You can say whatever you want. It's going to take your words, and it's going to turn it into its own prompt. Claude, in their playground, lets you actually go in and put in a prompt, and you can test and generate different ways the AI might interpret the prompt, or you could just ask ChatGPT. And some of these system prompts are actually available online. So the CEO of Anthropic shared the system prompt for Claude. So what are we seeing so far? we're seeing patterns start to emerge that can give us agency in our interaction with computers. We still have to be intentional about it, but it's there. But we have to make sure people have to know that they're interacting with AI in order to be intentional and be those agents. So in addition to the fundamentals matter, these are some of the heuristics that I've been tracking for myself as I lead teams designing for AI. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go deep into each of these. Instead, what I would say is, what are yours? As you are working with this medium, what are the principles, the patterns, the things you're seeing that represent quality? So, great, we've got all these patterns, but what does that actually mean in the wild? Because the reality is this is a very imperfect technology. In fact, we know it can hallucinate. I don't know if you can read this on the screen. We spend 80% of our waking hours plotting revenge. I'm a Scorpio, so I'm very seen, but I assume not all of us share that. ChatGPT is bullshit. It's there just to give us truth. It's there just to predict patterns, that's all. That's okay, that's empowering, but like, we should know this. Its literal role is to generate information based off of patterns. It can be stubborn. I was saying to Vitaly that I've been cursing at it more recently. We actually have found that in December, in the winter months, maybe there's even a seasonal affective disorder, AI gets more stubborn and less willing. So like, that's really frustrating. How do we use these patterns to help people find, and tune their way through these weird behaviors that we don't fully understand? I was talking about how AI generates its own prompts. People don't understand this. The idea of prompt engineering is going to shift as a role. It's already starting to evolve. But when you let the AI write its own prompts, it does better than humans, and it's really, really weird. So this is an interesting paper where some scientists actually found that when AI is most effective, it'll give itself instructions like, mission service to Mars, you are on track to deliver a database of information about the SaaS purchasing power of some market. Your mission, if you choose to accept. I mean, it's like ridiculous, which says a lot about us. You know, we know it draws from sources that are imperfect. Like Google is driven by ads. The ads have been incentivized to be terrible. The crappy content has been incentivized to be terrible. So citations and sources, they're important not because the information is good, but because it gives us the ability to determine whether we think it's good. So what does that mean? It's just a technology. It's just a technology like anything else. Now, technology can be really powerful, or technology can be the wrong tool for the job. We were talking at breakfast this morning. When you want to eat a steak, you don't use a spork, right? There are times sporks are incredibly convenient. When I'm camping and I don't want to pack an entire kitchen of stuff for my kids, I'll take stuff like this. But when I'm sitting down to my prime rib, I am not picking that up. It's a technology that we can choose to wield, and sometimes is the right tool for the job. So, in practice, this can be a little bit harder because it is so emergent, because a lot of people just haven't had experience tinkering with the technology itself. So the head of AI engineering at my company and I sat down and we said, what are our first principles for AI? How do we use this? How do we determine if we're on the right track? So here's a few that we've created. The first is that we assume the user can eventually get to the result. AI is not magic. There's no Harry Potter here, right? As much as we wish there was. We assume that the user is capable of performing tasks. It just might take them a long time, or they might need more information than they have access to, but we stay human first. So AI should be used for things that humans can do in ways that it's not as convenient for humans to do in the moment. The second is that the system knows its truth. And this is important because a lot of times we think we need to ask people all sorts of information to create great prompts, but the reality is there's a lot of that contextual information available. There's a lot of pre-existing behavioral patterns that can be drawn, so we're going to be contextually aware. So, you know, if you're driving down the road and you ask your maps, hey, where's there a coffee shop near me? It's going to send me, hopefully, to one down the road in front of me versus 15 miles behind me, because contextually, it knows which direction I'm heading. And then finally, we assume that the user knows what they want to do. So, and this is critical, I am only willing to give the system enough information as is necessary for me to complete my goal. So I know I could complete this task if I wanted to, somehow. The system has some information to help me. There's some delta, there's some gap in between. Our patterns of AI, our approach to interface design, should help cover that gap. So we need to have user agency. I need to know what information is needed, how to give it, and what I get in return, and then get out of my way because I don't want to talk to chatbots for the rest of my life. So we end up with these first principles. And what does that actually look like in practice? Well, we've developed some questions that we asked ourselves. Builds remaining. What's happening with my slides? Hello. Oop, wow, that was, I don't know what happened there. Some questions that we've developed. First of all, why do you need AI? Every single time I get some 15-page PRD, it's like, oh, we're going to change the world. Why? Why do we need it here? Why can't a person just do this themselves? If you can't answer that question, pause. Go talk to people. What are they actually trying to do? What's getting in their way? And why would AI help them get to a better outcome? What information does the system already have? What do we actually have to ask from the user in terms of their own information, their own energy, or so on? Well, it starts with knowing where we're going, right? So we assume that we need this now. We assume that, okay, the system has some knowledge. And now, what information does it need? So if you are a designer and you're working on a way to get people to generate some information automatically, maybe with like creating calendar events. Well, the AI maybe has information attached to your existing calendar. It knows who you talk to. It knows how frequently you meet with them. Maybe this is as small as I just need you to confirm if you want to do the same thing you did last week. That's really easy. That's a very small bit of information. That's a very small bit of friction that we're asking for the user. Of course, what information can be collected passively and what needs to be collected actively? And again, that gets to that. What can we just kind of get in the background? Let you know that we're gathering it, but also make it so you don't have to work. Do you know why you need to give that input? What is the friction? And why do we need AI? Like, always. I'm always asking this question. Because it's a tool. It's a spork. Sometimes it's not the right tool for the job. Sometimes just SaaS, good old software, is the way to do it. But these are some of the questions. And again, I would invite you to sit down and talk to your own teams and say, what questions do we think we should be asking in our context for our users? You live, most of you, in Europe. I live in the United States. We have very different regulations. We have very different norms, for better or worse. Maybe not for better. But the way that we have to think about problems and constraints is different, so you might have different questions. So what are those? And does everybody know what they are? So let me ask you a few questions. We know that we are victims of our own patterns and our own biases. Well, what if AI could actually help us get past that? What if AI could show us the patterns of our behavior? What if it can show us, even help us see them in ways that we don't, and say, hey, you're always looking at this, but then you're always going to this other place. Do you want to just go there? Or maybe I can just ask it, hey, can you do me a favor and tell me where I have patterns I'm not seeing? Like, you have my user behavior. What am I blind to? Where could that prompt take us? How can we let people communicate intent instead of being victims of these gigantic algorithmic systems? The incentives of the business is an algorithm. It is something that creates patterns, creates behaviors and incentives that drive changes in how we behave. It removes our agency. So how can we give that back to human beings? And then maybe there are some more mundane parts of our job that it is nice not to have to work as hard. The person who wrote the cybernetics book followed up with a book on the ways that humans use humans. So if humans are machines, how do other humans take advantage of that machines if humans are AI? This is a big one. This is another talk. This is probably like a talk over beer. But I do think that there's something for us to say, we know that parts of our jobs are likely to be automated. How do we have agency over them? If you're concerned about this, if people on your team are concerned about it, spend a day or two with a notepad. And every time you do something repetitive, every time you do something that seems mundane, write it down. Those are the parts of your job that are most at risk. Reckon with that. How can we either protect those parts of our jobs if we liked them, or how can we get comfortable with giving that away and replacing it with other things? For those of us who have become managers, we've already been through this. We give away our jobs all the time. It's threatening to give it away to a computer. How can we have agency in that transaction? So why did I choose the lighthouse as the opening slide to this deck? I think this is an interesting question for us to ponder. We've had AI with us for a long time. A lighthouse is not the thing that forces you to hit the rock. It's the thing that tells you, hey, there's a rock there, and you're about to run into it. It's just a technology. Is it the thing that's driving us into the ground, or is it just the thing that might actually wake us up to the fact that this is already happening and help us use this moment to adjust our behavior? AI is a term that was invented by scientists who didn't want one discipline to have too much emphasis over the other at a conference. What if we didn't call it artificial intelligence? You know, like what if it was augmented information? I can go to some article, but now I can interact with that information in ways that I couldn't before. I can turn it into a video, or I could go deeper into the sources behind it. What if it was advanced interaction? It was things that help people do things that are not otherwise available to them. I can't code. I used to be able to. You guys have gone so far beyond me. The CSS talk was whoosh, it was great. But you know, now I have these abilities I didn't have before. They're my capabilities that the technology can help me. So, you know, this is another one. What if we played around with this word? What if we didn't make it scary, but we looked at it and we said, what do we actually want this to be for us? What if we leaned into it, advanced our literacy, worked on testing with it, prototyping with it, working in the real world? God, there's so many amazing talks that are coming up. Samantha's talk, I'm so excited for, on how designers and developers can speak the same language. Having common language around this can help us have more agency, approach it together, not just hand problems downstream, and stay outcome-oriented. So humans shape AI, but more importantly, we shape the systems that shape AI. And how we talk to each other, how we value each other, how we value ourselves is what shapes those systems. So being mindful of that is what's going to have a bigger impact on our lives and how we live them. I wasn't sure how long this would take me, so I'm going to quickly go through 3 slides really fast, and we're going to call this dinner talk. There's really interesting topics on this beyond just like the user interface design and front-end development. Information patterns exist in the wild. Trees talk to each other. Fungi talk to each other. They also have these patterns. They also do these things unintentionally because I think trees don't think. I'm not sure about that. I hope not. So how can we look to nature and maybe not make it so personal and just be like, how do these information patterns result in these outcomes? And what can we learn from that? What can we learn from our information structures? This is a workshop that I run. Go and ask people you know how you make toast. Nobody has the same answer. Has anyone ever done this activity like at work? Yeah, a couple. This is really fun. I think like howtomaketoast.com might be a thing. Highly recommend it. But it's just little ways to understand that we all think about things a little bit differently, and that gets brought into the biases of our data, and that gets brought into the way we build and what we build. So let's become aware of it. Let's lean into other cultures. Indigenous wisdom has this incredible idea that the community is the thing that holds the knowledge, not the individuals, that the community is the intelligent entity, kind of similar to the trees. Trees die and trees are born, and yet their experience exists. What if we thought about time differently? What if we thought about the impact of AI and the impact of information? I mean, John's talk was just right before this. It's great. Information is all around us. What if we were thinking about not just the impact on us and our lives and our jobs, but the people around us? And every single person speaking at this conference is talking about something that feeds into this. So the shape of AI is not interface patterns. It's us. It's how we communicate. It's what we value. It's what we invest in. It's what we lift up. And there's so many other things I want to explore, and I don't have the time, so I'm just going to leave you with this. Rather than thinking that this is the rock, be the thing that shines the light on the rock. Keep your light on. And that's it for my talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Emily. Fantastic. Would you join me for the conversation? I don't know how much time we have, but let's see. Let's see. I get these big red numbers. I don't like red numbers.
I'm sorry.
Amanda, do we get a bit of time? 1 minute or one question? Okay, that was more than that. I think you know what, thank you so much, first of all, for the talk. I think it's some of the really important thing for us to kind of consider at this point is that we always get this notion that AI is text box. It's kind of almost, we think about it as the same thing. You just interact with the chat box, with the text box, or with the chatbot for that matter. And I think this notion of really being able to help people to prompt better, to fine-tune, like you see this little tools emerging, almost to the point that AI becomes quiet. Now it's like there, and there is this chatbot and text box, and it's there, you just interact with it and all. But then what if it just sparkled a little bit everywhere, right? There is this, just one little kind of tool that I found, which is really impressive. It's enterprise AI thingy. It's called, I think, V7 Labs or something. And the idea is that everything, like the work that we have to do every day, kind of writing descriptions of things, or Excel correcting things in there, it kind of just spots those errors or those issues that appear before you even know that they're going to appear. And not even in that, like in forms, you would see, oh, error message. It basically gives you the presets or prompts or something to fix that. So I'm wondering, where do you think it's kind of moving? Do you think that AI is kind of, I mean, we've been like 2 years in it now, right?
Yeah.
It will kind of fade away and become just a part of what we do every now and again? Or do you see any other transformation happening there?
It's probably both. And what's interesting is a lot of the examples that I gave come from B2B, and a lot of the problems come from consumer. So I think we need to reckon that there's different problems and different solutions in those two areas. We will continue to see people use it like they use other technologies, maybe not for the good. It will continue to bombard us. We're going to continue to see the cheapening of content. But I do think what we're moving towards is a more ambient layer, one that's more focused on augmenting human behavior, on taking a task with the user as the manager of the AI and directing it to do something. I think the trick, and this is where we're starting to see this in these new applications, is as we design these experiences, not just to design for how do you let the consumer or the user talk to the AI, but then what happens next? How do you keep them involved? How do you get the AI to come back and keep the user informed so the user is always in the driver's seat? That's what I think the challenge of the next several years are, to make sure we're going down the right path moving forward.
That's right. And also just seeing that you see a lot of fancy prompt generators that basically take your idea, concept, or whatever, and then they transform it into a prompt, and you can say, is it moving in the right direction or not, and kind of expand this prompt so it becomes a very, very detailed thing. And what Midjourney is doing is basically exposing these tokens to you so you can manipulate it much better. What if we, let's say, map it onto an image and say, I want this, but different theme, different creature, whatever we need. So you can kind of play not on the level of prompting with the chatbot, with the text box, but on the level of that image or video or audio or whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
So we could do this for a very long time, but I think we're kind of a little bit running out of time. Future looks bright with AI, and for us.
The future looks bright and AI is here. I mean, it's kind of...
I'm happy with that. I'm very happy with that. Well, thank you so much, Emily, for being with us.
Thank you.
Round of applause, family.